Hello everybody, and welcome to Just About Managing. Good afternoon, Chris. Good afternoon, Lee, from a once forever dry England. So today, the main subject is thanks of Chris, and we're going to be talking about why management matters. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Chris, and you actually got my when you sent it through in the chat. It actually I got quite deep in my thinking about it, because it's kind of links into some of the conversations in coaching I've been having this week as well. And I'm sure that, and this is the beauty of it, this is going to be completely off the cuff. We don't know what each other's going to say, so I suspect that we'll be changing tack in our own ideas as we go through. So, Chris, seeing as you kindly suggested the question, I'll ask you to kick off for us.
Oh, this is like classic, isn't it? Right, you suggest the idea and then get thrown in first.
Here's the boss, Chris. Just go and step in there.
Good delegation. Right, so
I know.
Well, yeah, management. Why does it matter? Simply, whatever business we're in, whether it's doing what we're doing, when we're in the corporate life or anything like that, I guess the reason why you exist is to provide like world-class service or world-class performance, or, just a positive experience, like for clients, for customers, right? And that performance, that service, that's like really sexy, right? That's kind of why you're in. That needs to be built on things that aren't so sexy, but just hugely important, right? So I see management as a thing that provides, when it's done well, consistency in terms of the performance of a team or teams or the organisation, or whether you're making like donuts, bacon sandwiches, selling derivative trades, doing IT support, whatever it may be, Lee, right? The confidence in that team, in that organisation, comes from having a real credible, sustainable, consistent service being delivered, and that delivers trust, and that needs to be based fundamentally on like really good management, like fundamentals, right? So that the team and the performance is built not on sand, but built on stone, right? And that stone is basic stuff that's hugely important, like accountability, ownership, and like organisation, right? God, look at me on that soapbox. Right, Lee, I'm going to throw the ball. Here you go. Catch that.
I'll put it on. I was going to say, you did the inference there from the start of your sort of monologue on it, Chris, was I think it seemed like you were inferring management wasn't sexy. It was like it was the grunt work. It's not sexy. Surely management's sexy. Maybe
Good
not.
Challenge.
Come on, Mr. Sexy Management. Then.
I think it's.
What do you mean? How's it sexy?
No,
Listening.
How's it? Oh, I don't.
I think
I should have said quiet, shouldn't I?
I think that, Lee, though, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? And there's probably this blurred distinction between what is sexy and what is satisfaction. Would be my translation. I think when I kind of reflect back on my management career, a lot of what I'm very proud of is actually through my management, in terms of what the people who work for me have achieved themselves. But ultimately, the quality of whilst I'm proud of them, but it's actually the quality of what they achieved under my management actually helped me succeed as well. And I think that's in some ways actually, you're standing on the shoulders of others, making you look good. But it all kind of ties back into the elements of management. Yeah, is it sexy? Don't know. Good question. It's a lot. I think you can be very frustrated and be very satisfied from it at the same time. But yeah, come on, Lee, tell us about sexy management.
Oh, I don't know. I've stitched myself up now, hasn't I? I think you summed it up well, though, John. Anyway, it's that I think there's a mechanical aspect of management. I think, isn't there, which is the the structure piece, as you talked about, Chris, in a way of providing that structure to make sure that operations work effectively and deliveries are there. And then there's the, what would you call it, the impassioned element of management. The getting the message across to teams, the why we're doing this, the what are we doing, why are we delivering it, what are we achieving element. But I think that goes back to your point, John, of then giving you the inspiration, the satisfaction, and the pride, I suppose, of being a manager or being a leader and getting that out of people. So I was probably pushing the boundaries too far with sexy. Maybe it's not quite sexy, but it's satisfying.
One of some of my reflection I was having this weekend when I was thinking about, okay, what we're going to talk about. And I guess sort of throwing the question out to you two is, when I'm sort of working with teams, whether it be in training development or what sort of one-on-one coaching and mentoring, what I see is trying to get people almost like through up the curve from actually management is a task to actually management is a passion, but equally it can bring huge value to your career. And I think that what I see is there's almost like at the outset often is that people are educated it's a task rather than actually the kind of total benefit there. Have you seen that, or do you perceive that, or what's your views? Chris?
I think management is a skill, right? Just like anything else is. The ability to organise, to choose the right people within a team, to create the right structure is like a huge skill, hugely undervalued. Management skills are just the enabler, right? It enables the team to thrive like on a daily basis, but also then use their collective efforts to kind of also look to the future, right? So you've got this ability when you get it right to not get sucked into loads of urgent tasks like on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, always kind of like making sure the pot's not boiling over, that there are exceptions all over the place or things going wrong, right? Because actually getting that right, having the right people who also got a passion about delivering that consistent performance enables everybody to put down the mop and bucket and kind of keep cleaning stuff up and actually have their head up and be looking at like what's coming and looking to the future. And therefore, I think that's hugely important right now because we've got huge change in terms of AI, digital trends, other stuff, right? So if you permanently just like looking down, mopping stuff up because you've not got the, embrace the important skills in management, you're kind of missing a trick. So I think it's just a huge enabler, guys, honestly. Yeah. In terms of individual, it's ownership of the, ultimately if you're the manager, you're responsible for the output and the outcomes of that team. But, getting the accountability right. I think we spoke, John, you were talking about when you went to go and see a client and some of the basic stuff just wasn't there, even around like, responsibilities, accountability, RACI matrix, stuff like that. Maybe can you shed some bit more colour on that, John? Like when you saw the RACI being in place or not in place?
I think when you in what I see in terms of when I'm working with clients is this to me there's this evolution of, so I think to be a great leader you've got to have all the management fundamentals in place, and often what happens is that people can go through this period in their career where they accelerate very fast from managing to leading, and in that period that they miss some of those kind of core stepping stones along the way. Kind of feel fundamental when you kind of look back yourself in terms of how you, but actually the pace has been so great that they're missed, and it's being able to take that breath back and actually be using some simple tools that actually helps you not only be able to effectively delegate and create capacity for yourself, but equally being able to be clear about, I own this, I'm accountable for these elements within my role, I'm being held responsible to deliver these activities. And I think that if you're able to bore that down, whether it's working with someone or even on your own, actually it kind of opens up that horizon in terms of, okay, where am I at, and how can I help myself in terms of prosper and grow? Mm-hmm. Chris is smiling.
Think about prospering and growing. I think it's that. Just you both touched on there. That I think, like you said, you mentioned it earlier, Chris, about management as a skill, definitely, and where you said there, John, about getting that structure and that framework around it. For me, I think one of the challenges is when people first go into management. First, there's that difference between management and leadership of larger teams, or that true leadership piece. When people first make that foray into management, I don't feel they're often given very much support or direction or training.
Yeah.
And therefore their first foray into management tends to be just following in the footsteps of whoever was their previous manager. Mm. Which may just be creating a cycle of shit management at times, potentially.
Yeah.
In there. And so I think it's that, like I say, it's getting that for people particularly new into it, who've normally been promoted into that because they've been very good at their individual contributor job, and then not been given the tools, the training, the framework, the support to then move into a skilled management role.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Lee. And I think often in, I think, all walks of business life, that training doesn't come until, once you've actually almost like created the foundations, it's almost too late. And then you're almost having to course correct within that as well. So, sorry, Chris, you were going to say something.
I think Lee's touched on a really good point there, right? And that kind of like first-time management, first-time leader position, or any like new team or like new organisation, or something that's growing where you've got to bring 2 or 3 different bits together. The managerial skills need to be really, really strong, because actually the performance isn't about the individual, it's about the collective, right? So you're managing the performance of the entity or the group or the collective, together. So one of the key bits of management is to be able to, it's a bit of a conflict between kind of like the ego, potentially, of being the manager, the person in charge, and, ultimately responsible, versus, being humble enough to let those people within that team grow themselves and use their strengths as well. So it's quite interesting. So how does that person or any manager get better and continue to improve? I think a lot of that is around like feedback loops from the team. So you've got like openness even within like managerial feedback, but also about learning from other people who've been there, right? So, learning from that experience through people who've been there, but also learning from your like friend network, who's also seen good and bad. Maybe they're going through a similar space. So it's not always about having to get like mentors or coaches, because you can reach like across that whole kind of like tripod of support from your friend network, inside and outside, the team you're in. But also that mentor and coaching network can all help and accelerate an individual to get better and to treat this really as like a skill. So, it's funny. It makes me think. This kind of makes me cringe virtually every weekend. But I was watching Man United's midfield get completely overrun again this weekend, and I'm looking at Eric Ten Hag. Maybe it's because he's got no hair as well, and that team has, just at times just looks completely like they all don't know what they're doing, and they don't know what the collective job is. So, I mean, it got completely overrun by Liverpool on the weekend and just relied on a couple of bits and pieces. But it's not because it was Liverpool. It's like 2 weeks before they played Brentford, and Brentford had 31 shots. They should have lost both of those matches about 5-0. Because basically they haven't got some of those basics around the collective responsibilities, the individual ownership of who owns what, and putting the right people in the right positions, but then collectively knowing what the outcome is you're trying to achieve. And actually, that's really important. I mean, there were instances, I think Gary Neville and other people were talking about it, where there was a throw in and the opposition took a throw in, and the midfield players should be between the ball and the United goal. And they were in front of they were going towards the Liverpool goal. So they literally just threw the ball, and Liverpool were just through straight away. It required nothing. So it was just like no basic, like management of the basics. So, yeah, I do swear at the TV quite a lot watching United, because the lack of like managerial basic discipline, that engine room, without that, you can't really win, can you? Because you just get overrun, you drop the ball at the back, you're not really focusing on the future at the forward. So that engine room, management's really about getting the engine room right, yeah. And getting everybody to, to understand what collectively you're trying to do. And then, something that you used to do, John, is you used to be very careful about the roles you'd give different people so they could play to their strengths.
Yeah.
And that structural kind of definition of who does what. Because then that would create the right freedom for those individuals to create their own solutions and to show their own leadership, because they're naturally playing to their managerial strengths in the areas they're in. That's really important. That's when you start to really release the diverse power of that group and that team, because you've got different strengths there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can remember the first time.
Oh, sorry, John.
So the first time I met Lee was actually in a budget challenge meeting, and it was as much that conversation was as much about understanding did he really know his numbers, and was he clear on actually what he was going to deliver from the budget he was asking for. It was as much as that as actually using it to sound him out in terms of, is he managing and leading, and is he clear in terms of his chain of command and activity and communication framework. And it's fascinating that how I think when you're leading in your role, you're actually able to almost like tangentially form an assessment and an understanding of someone, not necessarily just through directly asking, well, Lee, are you a good manager and leader of people? Whereas actually you can do that through information mining and dialogue, and in some ways you start to build up a much rounder picture of that. So that was I still remember that conversation to this day. So there we go.
I still wake up in cold sweats thinking about it, John. I felt miserably in that conversation. No, I do remember it. I do remember it distinctly. But I think it goes touching on that, but also back to your point, Chris, as well, about the management. When you look at the sports side of things, is management. Just thinking out loud as you guys are talking there, it's as much about knowing the strengths of your people, which is, you could say, is leadership to an extent. But then the management piece that comes in is going, okay, what's the right tasks, what's the right areas for these people then to focus on, and therefore then them understand their roles, responsibilities and accountabilities in there. So you could have, going back to football analogy, you could have the 11 best footballers in the world playing in your team, but if they all want to be a centre forward, you can lose every game. You need that balance, but then you need to instill in them what their roles and responsibilities are and what that structure is you're aiming for as a result of that as a team in there. And I think I'd, being open here, when I look back on my management career, I think I was good at working with people, but I probably wasn't as good as I could have been in giving them distinct roles and responsibilities that meant that they knew exactly what they needed to focus on, if that makes sense. And I think that's a real fundamental aspect of management versus leadership potentially as well.
And I think there's that often, I think particularly in large organisations, the concept of management and leadership is far too blurred, and that they almost get into this, let's talk about leadership far too quickly, rather than actually the basics of management, that we've been sort of focusing on, just in our conversation today. And any we're gonna move on to our easier, lighter subjects in a minute, but from both of you, I'll go to Lee first. One final word of wisdom on why managing matters.
I think I'm not sure whether it's why managing matters, but I think that the key piece I'd take away from this is making sure that first-time managers have the support and direction and training that they need to be as successful as possible in that first-time manager position, and not just expecting people to know it because they are natural leaders.
Yeah, lovely, like that, Chris.
I think recognising that embracing that you need to invest in management as a skill, individually, collectively, is hugely important. It means that when you get it right, you've got this balance between the urgent and the important. Yeah, you should get less pulled into that urgent stuff, be more in the important tasks. And ultimately, that's more rewarding for everybody. The team collectively wins. Yeah, we all remember those good managers. But there's also, importantly, loads of lessons to learn off the not so good managers. Interestingly enough, all managers, no matter what level you think they're at, they've all got a positive or one or two or three things that they do incredibly well. So I think it's always quite easy to jump on the things that people don't do. But actually, collectively, there's a lot to be learned from looking out on what the good things that people bring to the management table, right? And then trying to emulate that, find the commonality and look what you can leverage and learn from. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. My last bit of wisdom would be, and I think this is some of my reflection on preparation for a number of bits of the management training I've delivered over the last year, which is there are loads and loads of really thick books out there that almost try to overcomplicate it. But I believe that particularly people coming into management, even people that are, tenured managers like myself, it almost scares you off. And you can really boil it down to some basic fundamentals in terms of strong communication, being clear on how you organise, be clear on your role and be clear on the roles of the people who work for you. And if you can get the pattern around that and your routine about how you're organising yourself, everything else will come. So, here endeth the speech. Ba-boom. So our second
John,
feature,
but very good.
Our second feature in today's conversation was a suggestion from myself, which was memorable foodie experiences whilst on a business trip. So I have one to share, but I don't know whether any of you guys wanted to go first.
No, it's your topic, John. Off you go.
You go. You take this one, John.
Okay, so mine was, and I can't remember. So when we used to travel out on business to Malaysia, we used to work London hours in the Malaysian time zone. So we didn't used to finish until about midnight, and then we'd be starving hungry, and you're trying to find somewhere to eat. And sort of back in the earlier days of working in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur wasn't quite so civilized in the early hours of the morning. And we used to go and have street food, and it was the most amazing chili lime. I think it was sea bass, and they used to bring it out. I mean, you'd horrify if you'd see the state of the kitchens and the toilets. But I never had a dodgy tummy for it. It's probably some of the best fish I've ever had, and that will always stick with me in terms of that. you're absolutely exhausted, but actually the satisfaction of a great meal with a few beers, literally sat around a bench on the side of a busy street, was just such an amazing experience. Do you remember that one, Chris?
Do John? Jalan Alor in KL.
That's
That's where you
right.
go. Still there. I remember going there with a number of different people, and food was always epic. You have those like across the street. You have all the lanterns, so it would be like 1, 2 a.m. All the lanterns across the street, really atmospheric. Um, yeah, fantastic food, really good. Yeah, really good.
So, have you got one, Lee?
Mine was probably I'd got one. I was thinking of one that wasn't work related. That I might come on to later, actually. But the work related one. I remember being in India, and it was the second time I'd gone there. And I was over there for, I think, 4 weeks at the time. And it was actually the first time I went over was to set the GCS team up over there, John. So this was going back a long time ago. And the second time then was to look at a bit more structure for the team there. And there was myself, another colleague, and our manager at the time who was over. And we went for a meal one night there. And there used to be, I mean, the food there was fantastic. I loved all the food there. And we went to this really nice restaurant. And one of the guys in the team, in the GCS team in India, would always come every lunchtime. He would come to eat at his desk, have lunch at his desk. And his lunch would be a bowl of plain rice and a bag of chilies. And he would just eat the rice and a crunch of the chili, a rice and a crunch of the chili. And it was like I couldn't believe he was eating like this in a way. And it wasn't like, say, it wasn't the sort of standard lunch there. And we went out for an evening meal anyway with the team. Lovely restaurant, had a fantastic meal. And a couple of the team had chilies with their meal. And one of the team says, "Oh, go on, Lee, have a bite on these chilies." And I was like, surely they can't be that bad. They can't. I don't know what they were. I really don't know what they were. And I thought, they can't be that bad. They can't be. And I took not the biggest mouthful, but a decent mouthful of this chili. And it was bad. And it was very bad. To the point when the next day, I didn't actually leave the hotel room. And the team had to, I was meant to be in work, and the team had to ring me up and say, "Are you okay, Lee? Are you okay?" And I was sweating. I was not in a good way, shall we say. And the only thing, the only actual fact, my manager from work, so from the office, which was in Kalyani Nagar in Pune, had to ring downstairs to our hotel to ask them to bring me paracetamol up to the room, because I couldn't actually make the phone call down to the sort of concierge down there. And the only thing that got me through it in the end was rehydration sachets that one of the team in India said, "Take these, you'll be great with them, they'll just make you feel a lot better," and they did. But that was my experience. Great meal, don't always take a crunch on the chilies.
Lovely. Top that, Chris
Scoville
Dingle.
factor 20 million, Lee.
Yeah.
Crazy. Okay, so mine, John, Lee, well, I lived overseas for a long time, right? And I still want to tell a story related to Asia, although technically I was working there, but it was a placement, right? So this is a story that involves Glenn, John, and me, and going for
So, our friend
lunch.
Glenn Hambleton. Yeah.
Indeed. And we were going for lunch in the middle of our shift, and the shift's finished at like 3 a.m. So this is about 10:30, half 10, something like that. Cyberjaya, the middle of like, palm trees and like jungle outside, really warm, even that time of the night. It'd be really atmospheric, and you kind of like go across the road, make sure you don't fall down any like slippery holes and all that kind of stuff. And we would go to this place which did fantastic curry with these brilliant breads and everything. But the thing that reminds me of, that always remember this, is because it was a bit like, bizarrely, because Glenn had more hair then and I had less, but we always refer to it as the Scooby-Doo dinner. I was Scooby, and because Glenn's got more hair, which isn't difficult, but he's on the way, he's Shaggy in this story. Okay? So we're sitting down, we're having our food, we're doing whatever, and as ever, food comes out. It's absolutely fantastic. We've got chicken this, we've got some dal, we've got some that. The restaurant's not that big, but the waiters have all crouched on the floor. We're like, what are they doing? And they're trying to be really, really quiet. And they're motioning to us and they're going down, down, down like this. So we get down, we're on the floor, and then we realise why. There's an enormous fruit bat inside the restaurant. It's got in through one of the windows and it starts to basically flap its way around the inside. So Glenn and I at this point turn into Scooby and Shaggy from the start of Scooby-Doo, going underneath the table. And that goes on for about 3 or 4 minutes. They did give us more food. It did eventually leave the place in a big, out the main door because they opened everything up. But if Malaysians get under the table, it's something scary. So that's the one I remember whenever I think of overseas food.
Brilliant.
Yeah, probably be more Scooby and Scooby now. Glenn, you won't like me for that, but there you go. You were definitely Shaggy and I was Scooby in that story.
Oh dear. Brilliant. Excellent. Right, there we go. Nice foodie insights and a bit of humour along the way. So we're drawing to close for this week's podcast. Please subscribe and follow us as we evolve on our podcast conversations. We'd love to take you along with us. Today, obviously, it's been great to talk about the real value in management and actually how it can grow you as an individual and actually strengthen your team and the value you can get out of it. Lee thinks it's sexy. Chris and I think of it more as passion. But yeah, so thank you to Chris Dingle. Thank you to Lee Smith. And I'm John Lloyd. And we'll see you next time.